Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Village of Westmont Planning and Zoning Commission for our regular meeting on Wednesday, May 8th, 2019. The time is 7 o'clock sharp. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Carmichael.
Here.
Commissioner Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Van Buren is here. Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Bartel.
Here.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Here.
And Chairman Pill.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Having a quorum, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before you sit down, anyone who is going to provide testimony tonight, either for or against, I'm going to need to swear you in. It's a simple process. Just respond with a simple "I do." Do you swear that your testimony tonight will be the whole truth, so help your God? I do. Thank you very much. And as you're sitting down, please silence any cell phones or pages you have so that we have no interruptions. Okay, I will say that we are on television with this particular commission meeting, so we will need all speaking to be done from the speaker's podium. And when you do come up, if you haven't already signed in, either outside or inside, you'll need to sign in first on the sheet that's on the podium. All righty. Our first order of business tonight is the approval of the minutes of the April 10th, 2019 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Van Buren, second by Commissioner Carmichael. Any comments or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. All righty. Next up is our open forum. Is there anyone who is here tonight to speak on a subject that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll continue. Next, I'm going to review the public hearing procedures, which is basically what each of the agenda items will be. I will introduce each item on the agenda in the order they're listed. Please approach the speaking area and sign in concurrently. I'll then open up the public hearing. We invite the presenting team or individual to present the agenda item, explaining their item, addressing any findings of fact, and hardships as relevant. There's an overhead projector as well as a laptop. All diagrams will appear up on the TV screens and also for the audience at home. I'll then have staff offer comments. We'll ask anyone from the public who would like to speak, and I will ensure that everyone gets a chance to speak, and the applicant may address any concerns that are brought up by anyone from the public. Next, each commissioner will offer comments and question the applicant and/or staff. There'll be a discussion amongst the commissioners, and after that discussion, I will close the public hearing. At that conclusion, I'll call for a motion and a second on each agenda item, and then we'll go ahead and have final commissioner comments, if there are any, and we'll proceed to vote. After that, I will instruct the applicant on what the next steps are. All right, so that's our order for tonight. We'll begin with new business, planning and zoning item 19-010. A request from Napleton and Westmont Import owners regarding the property located at 301 to 311 East Ogden Avenue for the following. A, an amendment, the special use permit that was granted via ordinance 17-079 to allow the sale of used automobiles. Please. If you've signed in, great. If not, please do.
I have signed in. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for inviting me here tonight, and commissioners, thank you. So back in...
And your name, please?
Rick Brandstetter. I am the Director of Real Estate for the Napleton Auto Group. Back in 2017, while we were beginning the remodel of the Porches store, we came before this commission and the council and got approval to essentially move the sales operation from the original store to what was at that time called Alpha Motor Store or whatever, but it's on the corner of Ogden and Blackhawk. And we turned that into the primary sales office for the Porsche location while we pretty much demolished the old existing structure, but service stayed at the existing structure. At that time, we got a special use permit for auto sales. Included in that, and if I can do this correctly, so, it's not up on the screen.
There it is.
There.
Okay. So it's that entire L-shaped building. Ogden is obviously on the front, Blackhawk to the right, and then the sales office and building to the left. In the special use permit in 2017, one of the requirements was that the applicant shall only park Porsche vehicles in the front row closest to Ogden Avenue. This is no longer our main Porsche location. We've relocated back to the original, much larger location. And we're going to use this to do luxury pre-owned vehicles. So essentially, we're asking for the removal of the special wording to only have Porsches on the front line. We will still have Porsches there. We might have BMWs, Land Rovers, Jaguars, could be anything, but they will be luxury vehicles throughout that location. In addition, we will be back at some point in time to get approval for the signage and other improvements that we're doing to the exterior of the building. And the sign on there will say Napleton Luxury Pre-Owned. It will be owned by the same entity that owns the Porsche store. It will be operated by the same entity that owns the Porsche store. There will not be any service at that location. Any service to cars will be performed at the original Porsche location. So literally, nothing has changed other than we'd like to remove the requirement that only Porsches be on the front line of the lot.
I understand. Great. Thank you very much. Staff, would you like to add anything?
Just briefly, as Mr. Brandstetter just stated, the request is just to remove one of the conditions from the special use permit that was granted 2 years ago this month, and that would be the requirement that only Porsche vehicles be parked along the row closest to Ogden. Everything else would remain the same.
Great. John, anything you'd like to add?
Just my recollection of the background of that one particular condition, because there are several special conditions that went along with that special use ordinance. Those other conditions are common for auto dealerships. It was observed over time that the selling of pre-owned automobiles was a kind of a growing portion of the luxury automobile dealerships along Ogden, and this condition had never previously been imposed on other dealerships. But it was thought that in order to maintain the kind of luxury automobile dealership row and the aesthetics of Ogden Avenue, that this condition was important, that if this was in fact a Porsche dealer, they should at the very least in the front row display Porsche vehicles. Now it looks like they're changing their business model a little bit. And it looks like with the new sign, Porsche is not even going to be part of the signage for this property at all moving forward.
That's correct. All of the Porsche signage will be on the 201 East Ogden, which is the main Porsche dealership.
Okay, so that's just background behind that one condition. I have no thoughts one way or the other about removing it.
Okay, great. Okay. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak for this or against this? Seeing no one, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to commissioners, and we'll begin this evening with Commissioner Lavoie.
Okay, well, my fellow commissioners will be shocked that I don't have any questions. I'm in support of the applicant's variation request. Wow.
Wait a second.
Move to adjourn.
Let's make sure this is in the minutes.
It is?
Thank you, Commissioner Lavoie.
You're welcome.
Is that for the rest of the night or just? Okay.
You'll see.
Let's not press it, okay?
Stay tuned.
Commissioner Carmichael.
I have one question. How many parking spots are there along the Ogden, that front row?
There's probably 25 to 30 parking spaces, depending on how tightly we pack the cars and whether it's
Understood.
SUVs versus 911s.
Under the current requirement, every one of those would have to be a Porsche and or
Correct.
sit empty. Okay, understood.
And they are currently, and I'll point out that there was an approved site plan when the Porsche dealership got approved for this location, which had striped parking stalls, and they have to comply with that site plan and the parking requirements. So, there sometimes is a habit for auto dealers to cram as many vehicles as they can on a site, and the village was concerned about aesthetics and that happening, so that there was, one of the conditions is that they have to comply with the approved site plan, and that would include parking of vehicles, so they can't get 50 vehicles along Ogden. It would have to be the 25 or so.
Right. And they're expensive vehicles, so we don't want to cram them too close and ding them up.
Of course. That's my only question. I would like to make a public statement that had the opportunity to tour your facility when they reopened after the expansion, and that is absolutely outstanding, absolutely first class, and is to be commended.
Thank you.
And I have questions.
Address now?
I don't believe there is any requirement, but in all honesty, I think they're all Porsches. The main.
Imagine anything that's not is going to be on this
Correct.
property. All right, I support it. Thank you.
Commissioner Sharp?
Hi, welcome. I just have maybe one or two questions. Is there a rhyme or reason to which cars get parked along the street and which ones get parked further back from a business model and selling standpoint?
Probably not by manufacturer, but
I just mean in terms of your valets, where you park, where you choose to park your cars, and
the flashiest or the most likely to catch somebody's attention is what we want to put in the front. But again, they're pretty much all pretty high-end cars. If in the winter, we may put more SUVs closer to the front because there's snow on the ground. In the summer, we're going to try to put convertibles and things like that in the front because it'll catch people's eye. But, would we put a Land Rover ahead of a BMW X5 or something?
yeah.
Probably not.
That's what I was assuming, is just the vehicles that that are the flashiest, that probably have a higher price range to start with. So I think that removing this requirement is not going to do too much damage to what the original intent was behind our requirement. And I think the investment that you guys have put into the new building is significant, and we appreciate that. And that adds a ton of value to Ogden Avenue and the image that we're trying to maintain there. So I don't have any qualm with removing this requirement, because I think it's already kind of just economically appropriate that you park the best forward. I also want to say thank you for coming and getting this officially removed from your site, because I think a lot of times we impose requirements and property owners kind of just sneak around them if something changes in the future without going through and asking for formal permission. So I think it's a great thing that you're here tonight, just to keep everything transparent and approved. So I appreciate that, and I'm fully in support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bartel?
I have no questions. I'm also very supportive.
Great. And last but not least, I also have no questions tonight, have toured the facility a couple times, and absolutely an asset to both your company as well as our village.
Thank you very
Nice
much.
job with that. Commissioners, any final comments? Hearing none, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. I will entertain a motion for planning and zoning item 19-010, a request from Napleton Westmont Imports owner regarding the property at 301 to 311 East Ogden Avenue for an amendment to the special use permit that was granted via ordinance 17-079 to allow the sale of used automobiles.
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Bartel, second by Commissioner Sharp. Comments or discussion on the motion?
And just to clarify, the sentence in full should really read, to allow the sale of used automobiles in the front row. Because they're allowed to sell used automobiles throughout the lot. It was just the front row along Ogden Avenue that was at issue.
Okey doke. We don't need to
No, I think that was clear in the staff report, and in looking at the ordinance, I just want to make sure.
and through our discussions.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. All right, hearing no comments or discussion, roll call, please.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. You have our recommendation. This will go forward to the village board on one of the upcoming Thursday meetings, and one of the staff members will let you know when that's scheduled up. Best of luck to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and all the
Forward to see you
commissioners.
coming back with the new designs.
Feel free to stop by and visit us anytime.
All right.
Your check.
Continuing on with Planning and Zoning, item 19-011, a request from Michael Lynn, owner, regarding the property located at 102 South Lincoln for the following. A zoning code variance request for proposed 6-foot-high fence along the side yard adjoining a street. Good evening.
I did not sign in yet, sorry.
Please, thank you. And once you finish that, if you could just state your name and for the record also.
Yeah, as you mentioned, my name is Michael Lynn, and this is in regards to the new construction home that's just 1 block south of the village here at 102 South Lincoln Street in Westmont. Let me see. Do a presentation. Oh, yeah. No, PDF. Just right, that's why I was gonna open it. Yeah, I do. No way to make it full. Oh, did we? Yeah. Okay.
There it is.
Yeah? Okay, that's good enough, I guess. Yeah, so again, it's a property at 102 South Lincoln Street in Westmont. It's at the corner of Richmond and Lincoln Street. It's a new construction home. I did the drawings for it, and it's a challenge in most corner lots is how to achieve like kind of a very workable, livable backyard to the house. It's usually the trick for a lot of homes that are on corner lots. So the design of the house, what we did was we had the garage on the short end of the street facing Lincoln, and we have what appears to be like, or what works as the front of the house facing Richmond, which is kind of the broad side of the street. So I think it works very well. We have the back doors, or what you could call the back doors, like facing the alley. So the approach, the interior design, everything seems to work well. Just another shortcoming for corner lots that it's kind of you could consider a hardship is just the lack of privacy that most people would have, say if compared to homes that are on interior lots. Interior lots, you could have, say, a 6-foot fence all around the backyard, and you could be grilling with your family, or that you could have kids in a little pool or something like that without like prying eyes of neighbors and things like that. So with this lot, it being a corner lot, the codes required the frontage on Richmond Street to have only a 3-foot fence that was, I think, about 50% open, transparent. That what we wanted to do then is to actually make it a 6-foot privacy fence. Now, because we're looking for a very like upscale home, and it's a new construction, and everything's great about it, like, or at least I hope so, that it works really well aesthetically for us to use a white PVC fence, which is a higher quality fence, higher quality, say, than like a wood fence or what. So and actually works. It should look. I'm sure it'll look very seamless to the rest of the design, because much of the house has white siding, and so this white fence will work very well, complement the structure that it's a part of. I have a few more. This is the grading plan from the civil engineer. If you wanted some more details about like the conditions of the property, this is a drawing that I put together, showing a little bit more of just a more basic schematic of the dimensions of the lot. Some of the pathways and where the fence would be. To highlight the fence, I kind of just put shadow lines on it, so you could see where the house stands, and you could just imagine that as saying a shadow from sun, like in the southwest corner, like pitching shadows the house up a little bit, and it's a way just to kind of, in terms of presentation, just to highlight the fence. Actually, if you don't mind, I could hand these out if you do. Just in case you can't see the report.
Thank you.
I have 4 of these other counties. Now, these are the same drawings that are up on the screen.
Share it. I want my own copy. I want my own copy.
Again, the first sheet is the civil engineering drawing. It's just a very technical drawing. Then the next 2 are a little bit more kind of just schematic type drawings. This is an example of the fence that we plan to put up. It's just a white PVC fence. It's very like a kind of like a very clean, classy look. Let's see. I put this drawing together, kind of showing that's the actual house, and I've kind of ghosted in the location where the fence would be, encircling the backyard. That's from the more western view from Richmond Street, and then this is another view, just a little bit more east on Richmond Street, from the front of the house. Again, that's kind of a fence that just wraps around. So it's just again, it's a way to kind of give the future owners some privacy in the space, so that they could lounge with their families comfortably. And I think it would be something that they would very much appreciate. I live just 1 block further in another home on Lincoln Street, and right now I don't have a fence that faces the alley. I have a 2-year-old son, and already just from last summer we tried to like have a little play pool for him, and it was just very awkward just because there was nowhere to hide. It was weird. So like that's why I'm a little bit more conscious of it for these future owners, is that to give them some privacy, but also from people coming down Richmond Street, a lot of times people don't actually want to see, they don't want to see the barbecue grills or the clotheslines or what have you. They would like to have something, like even people on say Richmond Street or elsewhere in the village, they would like to see kind of just a clean look, I would think. So what was it? Anyway, I could keep jabbering, but you guys might have some questions, and yeah, I'll be happy to answer them for you.
I think that's fine. I appreciate the additional drawings. Let's turn over to staff and see if there's any additional comments.
Well, we were discussing the potential for having a different color to the fence, if this is something that you would like to discuss as well. Another option or difficulty with this particular design would be the alleyway. You know, might kind of, by having this fence right next to the alleyway and abutting the corner, it might reduce the sight line for traffic going through there, but at the same time, it might discourage that traffic because they won't be able to really have a good look as they make a right turn to avoid traffic coming the other way. So it has a plus and a minus in that regard. And another possibility could be something other communities do to preserve that sight line, but still provide that 6-foot height at the lot line would be to cut the corner literally 10 feet inward and maybe provide some landscaping. So that could be another idea that you could consider.
Explain that again. Yes, on that corner,
Okay,
to do what?
It would be to cut it diagonally about 10
Ah.
feet, a little triangle, and provide some landscaping, and that way provide that sight line and beautification and kind of minimize that imposition while preserving the privacy for the homeowner.
That's a question. Nalini, there's a line of sight triangle requirement for the village. I don't know if that
10
was.
feet?
What's that?
Is it 10 feet?
I don't know the dimensions. And I don't know if that was looked at in conjunction with this fence. I know there's the sidewalk and then the right-of-way, the parkway that provides
Right.
line of sight once you get on beyond the fence for turning, but pulling right out onto the sidewalk. I don't know if the line of sight has to be maintained on the property itself, or if there's that parkway, it takes that into account when you're putting up a fence or a structure.
I believe it has to do with the traffic, the car traffic at corner lots. I'm not sure that alleyways and sidewalks are covered.
Right.
That's my question.
that's the
Does it apply to
difference.
alleys as well as streets?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think I looked at the same code, and I think the code, that line of sight triangle that pertains to the opposite corner at Richmond and Lincoln, not to be applied to alleys, at least from the codes that I've read.
If it applies to rights-of-way, it applies to alleys. I just don't know if they're.
We had a similar condition on 55th Street a while back, and there was a triangular requirement from the alley onto 55th Street. You guys remember that?
While John is looking this up, let's continue.
I think this might be one of the reasons why there is a 15-foot setback requirement for side lots, abutting streets, which this is what the applicant is seeking a variation from. So this solution provides, ample room and privacy in a larger lot, not restricting that space, while at the same time providing a line of sight solution. So if it is 10 feet, that would be our recommendation following this presentation, with some landscaping at the base, as well as maybe looking at a different type of color that might match some of the wood fences in the area while still providing for a vinyl fence.
Here it is.
Great. John, we'll come back to you
Okay.
a little bit. Okay, thank you, Nalini. Is there anyone in the public who is here to speak either for or against this item? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Pass that down to John.
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear well. John. I have no objection to the height of
If you could sign in first.
I signed in out there, do it here.
Perfect, thank you. And I know I swore you in, and then
Sure.
if you could just give us your name.
John Gergitz.
Okay.
My concern is at the alley back there. And you do need an angle there. And he can, you can raise that fence for that angle to protect his property privacy. But you need to have it so when people pull up, they can see kids on that sidewalk. Otherwise, the kids are going to be right there at their bumper. And that's a very busy area there. We have a bus stop at the corner, and you have a lot of kids walking between there. So that's the only thing I saw, The height, who cares, It's not a big deal.
Okay.
But is there a code regarding that corner? Corners like that?
We're researching it right now.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about. Okay, that's basically it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, I will close the, I will move on to commissioners at this point. I won't close the public hearing, we'll keep that open. Comments, John?
Well, I'm just looking at this document, which was prepared by the applicant or from staff?
Well, that was in a folder I inherited, and I'm not sure what section of the ordinance it's from.
Okay. And what it talks about is that no tree shall be planted closer than 30 feet from the point of tangency of the curbs. Talks about curbs. Not sure that we have curbs in alleys, but I would think maybe that's not worded right. And it talks about, you know, forming the triangle and keeping that triangular area free of obstruction so traffic visibility is not obscured. Whether the code directly addresses the line of sight or not, this is still a request for a variance. So you'd have the right, if you want to create an enhanced line of sight at this alley, to perhaps require the applicant to triangle this fence off.
Great. Okay, thank you, John. We'll start with commissioners. I'll begin with Commissioner Carmichael on this, please.
Evening, Mr. Lynn. Question on gates. Could be gates in the fence, and where would they be?
There, I snuck them onto this drawing. Is the pointer shown? There's a gate about that location and a gate here at the back location. That's so that the residents could take trash out to the alley.
And just be a single hinged gate?
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Not a dual hinged?
No, yeah, I was thinking a single hinge.
What's your feeling if we would request a sightline 45-degree angle cut there at the northwest corner
I would,
for visibility and safety?
That's for pedestrian traffic.
right. Like, I care about people on the sidewalk just as much as anyone, and that, I'm willing to work with you guys on what's required. I would hope that like, say, the 10 feet might be sufficient. I think, like, I wouldn't want it to, like, the degree of the angle, I wouldn't want it to kind of compromise the backyard very much, but that's my thought. I mean.
Good. Thank you.
Commissioner Van Buren?
As far as the fence is concerned, I have no problem with the fence. The two items that have been brought up, one is the color, and I think that white fits with the house regardless of what other fences in the area are. If you're gonna try and coordinate it, it would probably best to coordinate it with the house and not the neighborhood. As to the line of sight, I think that is important because, as we said, there are a lot of kids in this area, and you pull right off of that, and with a 6-foot fence, that's as high as most cars. And so it should be angled on that corner for the purpose, for the safety, whether or not it's in the ordinance.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Thomas?
As far as the color of the fence, I think I agree with the fellow commissioner. You should match your house to it, not neighbors. You know, there's not a neighborhood thing. You know, I also agree about the line of sight. You should look into that and follow whatever they come up with.
Okay.
Other than that, I agree. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Commissioner Sharp?
I have watched this home be built over the last many months, and it's a very impressive home.
Thank you.
I think the color of the fence is kind of, I don't wish to have a real opinion on that. I think you're the architect and you can design what you'd like in terms of color. I do happen to live surrounded by a couple of white PVC fences, and they show dirt and mildew more. But I think you know that. The line of sight, I think, should be a requirement of the, I feel like this mic is really hot. It should be a requirement that we add, because I can see my kids and their little tiny bikes riding past this. There's no visibility. Someone driving north in the alley might not even realize that there's a sidewalk there to be aware of, and kids certainly aren't aware. So I think that triangle should for sure be a requirement of this approval. Other than that, I'm fully support. I love the house. I think the fence is required, and wish you best of luck.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bartel?
I'm also in agreement with the enhanced sightline, so, the neighbors, are they okay with the larger fence? Have you talked with them, or are they, no objections to having it? I mean, they're the ones have to live there as well, so.
Right. The only neighbor that I've been in talks with is the neighbor directly to the south. I think it might be, I don't know if it's maybe 105 or so, South Lincoln. Anyway, he's kind of all for it, and he actually would like, both me and him are going to be in talks about splitting the cost of the fence that's between the two properties. So,
okay.
like,
that's-
I didn't catch that. Say that again, please.
The neighbor that's directly to the south of this property, I don't know offhand what the exact address is, but he, like, both him and I are in talks that, because he would actually like the same fencing crew that I'll be hiring, he wants to do all new fences for himself too, and he says that and actually in terms of color, he says whatever color I go with, he's gonna go with. And he doesn't even want mismatched fences, he would like them both to be the same. So he agreed with the white color, and he was okay with for his house. Like, so again, that's the neighbor that's directly to the south of this house.
I like the fact that you're deterring traffic cutting from Des Moines to Richmond. You know, the fact that it's set up in that way, you can eliminate that or at least deter it, so. And I'm supportive. I agree, though, the sight lines, we have to help with that, because that's a safety issue.
Got it.
So, thank you.
And Commissioner Lavoy?
I do have two comments. One is, since the fence is in close proximity to the sidewalk, it's clearly just an invitation to be written on, painted on, especially with a whiteboard. You know, it's just a totally, I don't want to see that happen. So maybe if you could take a look at the fence specification. There are plenty out there that have texture and corrugation. They can look like wood, they can look like stone. It might be a better choice. And then also, if, especially towards your comment related to the neighboring fence, which is going to create a pretty narrow pathway, maybe a consideration could be to maybe add some solar lighting to it to keep that walkway illuminated. I'm not saying it's part of the requirement here. I'm just saying that since it's a real narrow, right next to the sidewalk, and the fence is right on the sidewalk, maybe the top of the fence could have a solar light or something to keep that walk illuminated, because then you're gonna create this real narrow corridor if the other fence is put on.
Well, how is that, I'm sorry if I misunderstood, how is that in regards to the neighbor's fence?
I'm just saying that, you know, if that were to go up, you're gonna create this real narrow pathway
Okay.
between the fences, and it's something that, you know, is an invitation for bad activity. I don't see that happen either, so I just want you to consider the material makeup of the fence, and then also there's other fences out there that would provide a sound attenuation if that interests you at all. So with that, I agree with Commissioner Sharp's and all the other commissioners' comments about the sight lines, and I'd be supportive.
Oh, he means here.
I have a few questions myself.
Sure.
First, I am probably the leader of the anti-white fence brigade. They are very, very stark and bright. You've chosen to go with a white house, so in this case, I would concur that that's probably the best color. But boy, as these fences are gaining popularity because of their endurance, the white ones really stand out. So, and not in a good way. But if that's what you want, and it does match the house, I would agree that a beige or a tan, which at least tones it down a little bit, might not look as good with a white house. So that's your choice. So I think you've already answered my next question, but I'm going to just ask it to make sure. So the neighbor to the south has a fence now that's wood.
Yeah.
So were you planning on going up against it, or is that coming down and then there'll be a new fence between the two?
coming down and replace that
That's what
fence.
he's gonna match, that's what you're referring to that discussion.
Right, like, and he says whatever I go with, he's gonna go with, and it only makes sense. In both of our minds, both me and the neighbor, is to have a single fence.
You don't know how happy I am to have 2 sets of white fences. That's fantastic. Anyway, now, a couple of issues that I have as far as some potential problems. And really, they exist on both the Richmond side as well as the alley side. So let's start with the alley side. So you're going right up to the alley.
I'm going to look at the code to see how far I have to come off the center line of the alley. I was looking at some of the neighboring fences, and I was just gonna stay in line with that one, with the other ones down the alley. I'm not planning to encroach anymore on the alley then.
I think our staff needs to make sure that that's looked at carefully, because one of the things you've alluded to is bringing the garbage out through that southwestern gate. You can't just park it in the middle of the alley, because nobody can drive through the alley then. So there has to be enough room for you to be able to have your garbage serviced, and yet maintain some clearance for vehicles and things like that. So I want to make sure staff is on top of that. Now let's go to the north side, which is the Richmond side. So are you going right up against the sidewalk? I think that's what Commissioner Lavoy was referring to. So that's unusual to be that tight to the sidewalk with no little landscaping buffer. It sort of creates a, in my opinion, an unfriendly wall.
Yeah, I was gonna give it some more thought for the sake of the variance and everything. I wasn't. I didn't give it that much thought at the time. I just wanted to seek for approval. But I've wondered too. How far off the sidewalk should I be? I wouldn't really want it to be like the PVC down to the actual concrete. I don't think that would look very well either. It was actually, even when I was doing this little drawing that I wondered that too. Even there, as I was putting that together, I kind of thought that, it should be off, definitely at least a foot, if not maybe 2 feet. I
would agree with that. There should be a transition to that space.
Right.
And whether it's grass for easy maintenance, whether it's a green space of some type of shrubbery or something like that with mulch or something, I certainly would concur with that. And I would also call staff's attention to that as we get further down the road with this. And then finally, I am in full support and agreement, and so much so that I will actually propose an additional motion to this when we get to that there does need to be some type of line of sight. This is a very dangerous potential situation with a 6-foot fence. That's part of the reason that you see 4-foot, 3-foot, and slatted fences, so that there is visibility preserved. I understand that you want privacy and security, so I think there has to be a little give and take on that, and there's going to need to be some type of a triangle determined by staff and you and worked out together. So I think 6 of the 7 commissioners have said that now, and I think that's going to be a requirement as far as that part of it's concerned.
Okay.
Okay, any problems with that?
No, as mentioned, I'm willing to work with you guys. I'm doing, as I do designs and things, I'm very conscious of the aesthetics of stuff. I'm not a slash and burn type builder. I like to actually make things look good or make them useful and stuff for the families.
Great. Well, you've built, I too have been going around that block watching you build,
Yeah.
and it's a very nice structure.
Thank you.
And a beautiful home. It looks like it's going to be very appealing. I hope that you're successful in the sale of it.
Absolutely.
And I have had a chance to see the materials used, and it's been high quality stuff. So
Awesome. Thank you.
I tip my hat to that project.
Cool.
All right. I have no additional questions. John, did you have anything you wanted to say in conclusion here, or to wrap up?
Yeah, Mr. Sylvester gave me a code provision which has to do with landscaping and maintaining a line of sight triangle with landscaping. There's also a section under Chapter 70 with streets. It's Section 70-70 entitled Obstructing Vision at Corner Lots, and that states it's unlawful to maintain any object or hedge which would obstruct view on any corner lot at a height greater than 24 inches above street grade, and that A lot located at an intersection between a street and an alley shall be considered a corner lot for purposes of this section. So basically, it's saying no obstructions allowed on a corner lot, and by requiring a line of sight triangle here, by having them cut back that fence, you'd be, they'd be in compliance with that section as well. So I agree, it should be a standalone motion, and staff can work with the applicant to revise the plans.
Great. Commissioner LaVoy, I sense a question, or perhaps it was answered?
Well, after, your questions, I would like to add a comment, and that is that, when that white fence is right on the sidewalk, it's gonna create a maintenance issue for the applicant. Bikes are gonna hit it, strollers are gonna hit it, everything's gonna hit it. And it really makes sense to add that 2-foot landscape hedge across there that's lower than what our village attorney has suggested, and not to additionally, provide an additional impedance towards the line of sight. But that will give you that, preserve the integrity of the fence, and it'll add character to that offset, and it won't be so stark. So I would recommend that we would provide some landscaping in front of it, in particular a hedge that would provide some sort of buffer there.
Yep. All right. Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing on this. And we'll begin with, I will entertain a motion for planning and zoning item 19-011, a request from Michael Lynn, owner, regarding the property at 102 South Lincoln for the following. A zoning code variance request for proposed 6-foot-high fence along the side yard adjoining a street.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Thomas, second by Commissioner Bartel. Comments or discussions on the motion? There will be a follow-up motion to this. Hearing none, and I just let the commissioners know that your vote on this will include the findings of fact for this particular issue. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel.
Yes.
Commissioner Lovoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, and Chairman Pill.
Yes. I will entertain a motion under planning and zoning item 19-001 for the applicant, Mr. Michael Lynn, to work with our staff to form a sightline triangle on the northwest corner of this junction where the alley and Richmond meet, as well as to pay special attention to the space between the alley and the fence, as well as the public sidewalk and the fence, and work that out with our applicant. Looking for some landscape in that area and for increased safety.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Sharp, second by Commissioner Bartel. Any comments or questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bartel.
Yes.
Commissioner Lovoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. Okay, I will explain things when Mr. Lynn gets back, and we will continue with planning and zoning item 19-012, a request from Colette. I hope I don't do too bad on this. Ruich. I had the R right. Colette Ruich, owner, regarding the property located at 255 North Wilmette for the following. A zoning code variance request for proposed covered porch encroachment into the front yard setback.
Good evening. My name is Peter Lukowski. I'm with the Cobblestone Development. I'll be speaking on behalf of Colette.
Okay. Have you signed in?
Yes, I did say that already.
Fantastic.
So this is a front porch replacement. You're looking at the existing conditions right now. The porch was built like in 50s. It's a metal canopy with the damaged concrete steps. What we're trying to propose is a new porch, which it's going to be exactly same footprint, but the only difference is going to be we would like to extend the existing roof line over the porch. The front columns will be constructed with the masonry, which would match existing stone on the house. Wood beams that will match the colors of the windows. We are in the process of replacing windows right now with the Tudor browns. So what we're trying to achieve is basically better curb appeal from the street. That's it.
I think you'll need to spend a little time just going over, in this particular one, what why you're requesting a variance and what the reasons for the variance are.
The reason, well, actually, we're just trying to make the house look better. That's basic. There's no hardship. All we want to do is to extend the roof over the porch. We don't want to install the metal canopy over the new
Well, you
porch.
are encroaching substantially with this new design, well past where it is now.
Well, the porch actually is exactly same footprint, so we're not moving anything forward. The setbacks is exactly the same. What we want to do is basically cover the porch with the roof. So I have a side plan here for you to look to. So porch stays exactly in the same location.
Maybe you could explain what this front yard setback of the existing house is and what the front stairs and stoop setback is?
Okay, sure, yeah, the front setback right now, it's almost 20 feet, and the setback to the house is almost 25 feet. So when you look on the existing conditions, which are right here, this is exactly how existing porch it is now, it's just not covered. It's got the metal canopy on top of it, which doesn't look very well, so that's why we want to extend the roof over existing porch.
So you're not increasing the setback encroachment from current conditions, except to the extent the overhang is getting replaced and enhanced a little bit from the house?
Correct, that's all we do. The footprint of the porch itself is exactly the same.
See, it was my understanding you wanted to extend it beyond where it is now.
This is actually a technicality, if I may. It really relates to the fact that the code considers landings as allowable encroachments into the front yard. But once you cover it with a structure and put, the actual brick and cement bearing structure, then that changes that definition into a structure that is no longer encroaching legally into the front yard. And it changes the front setback.
But is it a big difference between having a metal roof and a shingled roof?
It has to do with the actual structural elements that hold up the roof. So it's extending the roof versus just having an awning that is removable. That is the difference.
I have a couple examples actually that are on the block right here. This house right here is right across the street. So it's got the porch which is covered right now, and it's about 20 feet from the setback is about 20 feet too. Couple houses down, this one over there, it's about 20 feet from the setback from the street too. So I would not see why it would be a problem to cover the porch with the roof.
Well, we're not saying that it's a problem. We haven't gotten that far yet. I think we're trying to figure out what you're doing.
Okay.
So that's the key part, because as I read the write-up, it seemed like we've gone from 35 feet, which is the zoning area, to 25, which you're zoned and grandfathered in for, to 20 feet, which is what you've got, to 15 feet, which is what you're looking for. But you're saying it's not 15 feet.
No, we're looking
It's
still at 20 feet.
That's the 5. Got it.
That is a 5.
Got it. That's the fine print. Okay, I understand. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add to that before?
No, that's it.
Continue? Okay. All right. Nalini, would you like to say, you pretty much summarized it already, but is there anything else?
I drove by it and basically, it does look like something does need to be done to that porch. Also, I've received reports from area, folks that know the area, that covered porches are really something that might be something the village wants to look for in a proactive way, as providing for removing a requirement that it be, maybe you could phrase it a little better with the legal side of it, but removing this requirement that they would come and get a variance, seek a variance for this particular use.
Okay, great. All right. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak for this or against this item? Seeing no one, we'll move on to commissioners, and we'll begin with Commissioner Van Buren.
I was really misunderstanding it from when I initially read it, that the 5 feet was actually beyond the 5 feet that you're already there. I absolutely have no problem at all with this. I think it's a good thing, and it certainly isn't going to change the character of the neighborhood, as you indicated, by the house across the street and the house next to that, where it's already done. So I have no problem with it.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Thomas?
I also misunderstood, and I went out and looked at it and compared it, the measurement of the porch coming out from the house, and looked at the houses going south and north, and they were all back from where your porch was. And the way I thought, since you're going to enclose the porch, that made it different than where it is right now. But then I looked at your gardening, which is coming out from the house. That's taking up space away from, so you're already in that area there. You know, I have no problem with this at all. Improve your porch.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharp?
Hi. I'm actually a little conflicted about this. Listening and understanding what's going on, I'm in favor of it. I'm especially in favor of adding porches and usable covered space to our street fronts. I think that adds a lot of value to our communities and neighborhoods, so I want to support that. But when I look at this street, it seems to me that what we're talking about is a pretty severe overall encroachment. I mean, we're getting pretty close to the sidewalk, and I think it's out of line with what's up and down the street. Even across the street, the photo that you showed is set back further than what you're proposing here. So I don't know yet.
I would just point out that what they're proposing actually already exists.
Right, but what we're doing is we're saying that 100 square feet or whatever that we're allowing as a stoop can just be covered, which is more massive. It's bringing the mass forward onto the site.
Right.
You're shaking your head no.
It's not 100 square feet.
I believe that there is a very.
Two chairs there.
No, you're misunderstanding. I believe that there is a section of our code that allows up to 100 square feet of stoop to be within the setback. So what this project is doing is setting a precedent for now enclosing those existing stoops with a covered porch.
Well, only with the variance.
With a variance, yeah. Are we in agreement with what this is and what's happening?
There is a difference between the open and closed, and this is something I have to kind of go through a little bit, and covered and uncovered, and then the bearing walls or columns. So I think, those are the different nuances, and to the degree that this is not enclosed, it does not become an addition to the house. It's simply an open space. And that is where we are as staff and why we feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think I would concur with that. I mean, if we go forward saying that stoops can have roofs over them, and that's not going to kind of eliminate them from being able to be a little closer to the street, I'm in favor of that, because I think everyone else here see the value of those front porches. So with that understanding, I think I'm in favor.
Commissioner Bartel?
I'm also in favor. Those houses are older, and it does need repair, and it's an opportunity to enhance that. It is very similar to the other houses in that area, so I'm also supportive.
Thank you. Commissioner Lavoy?
I just need a couple of clarifications on the staff report. In the staff report, you mentioned 2 times in the last paragraph and the paragraph next to last that it would be down to less than 20 feet. What we're talking about is 20 feet, correct? It's not less than 20 feet.
No.
Okay. And then, secondly, what other variations have been done that take it to 20? Do we know? That was missing too, that usually like a history of we've granted this variation in the past. Are we setting precedents here, or is it something that we've done before?
I'm not familiar with cases that have occurred that are, that have gone through the variance process, but there are porches that are covered, that are open and covered, that exist, that are.
So we
at the
have that
20
exists.
That
This
exists.
exists now, too. I understand that, but I just want to know if we're setting precedents, that's all.
I'll try to answer that, because I've been here, we've got newer staff who
Yeah,
may
yeah, I
not be
get it.
familiar with the history. I did email Bruce an address of a property that was approved both by Planning and Zoning Commission and the Village Board about a year or two ago, where there was literally just a crumbling concrete steps that encroached, I think, about 19, with the 19-foot setback. And they were proposing a full covered front porch, and that received approval. Very similar situation, and the comments were, boy, this really enhances the streetscape, and that's why the variance was approved.
Got it. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Okay, my turn. Yeah, I'm supportive, and I'll tell you, I have driven by this property for many years, and it's one of the very few properties in this entire village that almost every day, the people who live there are out on that porch, and neighbors are there, and it gives me a good feeling every time I drive by there. I wish I could see more of it. And just, it's a very small stoop, and for the roof to come out versus an awning, I see as insignificant. It's going to dress it up and make it a little nicer. I couldn't be more supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have had all my questions answered. Thank you. Any other commissioner comments or discussion items, or staff, or John? All righty. I will close the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion on planning and zoning, item 19-012, a request from Colette Ruich, the owner, regarding the property located at 255 North Wilmette, for the following. A zoning code variance request for proposed covered porch encroachment into the front yard setback.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Carmichael, second by Commissioner Van Buren. Any comment or discussion on the motion? Remember that your vote will include the findings of fact on this one also. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Lavoy,
Aye.
Commissioner Carmichael,
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel.
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. You have our recommendation. It's a recommendation which will be forwarded on to the village board. Staff will let you know. You'll appear at a village board hearing on some upcoming Thursday night, and they'll have the final disposition. Best of luck with it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Only took me 2 tries on the name.
It's only 5 letters.
Yeah, that's a good point. I totally choke with 6, so. All righty, planning and zoning item 19-013, a request from Jason and Roxanne Engstrom, owners, regarding the property located at 933 Oakwood Drive, for the following. A zoning code variance request to allow the construction of a patio in the side yard, and B, a zoning code variance request to allow the construction of a shed in the rear yard with a reduced separation from the principal structure. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so as you mentioned, yes, we are applying for a variance for both a shed project and a patio project. And just wanted to introduce ourselves. We were lucky enough to be featured on the Westmont Neighbors magazine a couple months back. This is my wife, Roxanne. We've got 4 children, Annika, Evangeline, Rain, and Abishai, and they're all in various different schools in the community, and our dog, Chewbacca.
And Jason, can you make sure you say your name?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes, I'm Jason Engstrom.
Thank you.
And Roxanne Engstrom.
Perfect.
And we are committed to public education, and particularly CUSD 201, as that is our children's district. So back in November, when this home came on the market, which happens to be situated right on a corner lot between the high school and the junior high, we thought, what a perfect opportunity for our children to walk out the door and be at their schools for the next, at least for 6 years of their schooling careers. So we moved to this home in November, and we really liked the corner lot situation, the open space. We didn't so much like the fact that the backyard is almost non-existent, and let me show you that here. So as you can see, the existing backyard layout, and earlier the gentleman spoke of the challenges of corner lots and the backyards in those situations. Ours is the same. That little red highlighted section there is 15 feet behind the house to the fence and the neighbor and the lot line. And then we've got a small deck that extends 10 feet, so there's another 5 foot between the deck and the lot line. So that is the backyard. But we also thought to ourselves, we've got this wonderful door to nowhere on the side of the house, which is just off of our kitchen. And having not thought about corner lots and variances and those type of issues, we thought this is a perfect opportunity to build a patio just outside the house. And when we went to go apply to that, we learned that there are some restrictions on that condition. So the reasons, let me skip to this first. The reasons that we are applying for the variance are the fact that we have virtually no backyard is a hardship in terms of building a structure like a shed. So the Oakwood homes surprisingly have very small garages. We can barely fit our 2 vehicles in the garage, let alone anything else.
And you saw 4 children with 4 wheeled vehicles each, plus we bike all the time in this community. We bike to the library, we bike to the farmer's market, we bike to downtown. It's a really big part of who we are, and our children cannot have their bikes right now currently.
So we also didn't take into consideration that building a shed might be a challenge. We just thought that would be something that would naturally be done to store tools and that type of thing, and of course our bikes. So the problem with the current zoning restrictions say that you cannot build a structure 10 feet or a shed 10 feet from an existing structure. And based on the layout of the property, there's really no place we could put a shed other than right smack dab in the middle of our side yard, which wouldn't look so appropriate. However, there's a perfect spot for it just behind the home, which makes it hidden to just about everyone. And then with the patio, contrary to one of the other gentlemen's desires to have privacy, our desire is really community building and knowing our neighbors, and really having open spaces where we can sit outside. And we actually liked the idea of not having a backyard, because when you're in your backyard, no one can see you there and no one can join in and have conversation and build neighborly community. So we really see this patio on the side as a perfect opportunity to see passersby and just inviting them in and getting to know our neighbors in this new community. But we cannot build a terrace, is the way it's phrased in the zoning restrictions, anywhere other than a backyard, of which we really can't do that based on the size of the backyard. And I think the idea is that this patio is going to be attractive. It's going to look nice, and I think furniture and tables look much nicer on a patio than they would sitting on the grass in this part of the home. So here is the proposed site plan. This highlighted section to the right shows where the foundation, which is essentially an 8 foot by 8 foot foundation, would lay for the garden shed, and that's just next to the existing deck structure and a couple feet back from the home. And the space is, actually, I can show you a picture of it. I had skipped it earlier. This is the space that we would be building that shed on. It's perfectly situated for the shed, the 8.5 by 7.5 foot shed structure that we intend to build. And then the patio would sit just off of that door to nowhere that you saw earlier. That would extend 18 foot out from the house and 18 and a half foot out to be adjacent to the end of the house. And then there would be the same pavers would be used to build a pathway to the existing deck structure. So that puts the edge of the patio about 14.2 foot from the property line and the sidewalk, and 34.2 foot to the curb line of the house. We were asked to do a tree survey, so there is a tree that is in the vicinity of this patio. It's probably a 20 to 30-year-old linden, 25 foot tall or so. No intention to remove this tree. I think it's going to provide nice shade for us. And the patio would sit right off of that stoop over to the edge of the house. And here's a rendering of what that might look like when it's finished. So we also noticed that, oh, and here's where the shed might sit if this were approved. But we did notice, although there are restrictions to terraces in front yards, there do seem to be several homes in the community that already have put terraces either in front or side yards. This one's at 132 South Linden. I believe that project was just completed in the last couple of years. There's one on 126 West Burlington. And then this one, which is actually just behind the building here, is a side terrace at 36 South Grant Street, similar to something like what we're proposing here.
And I just wanted to come, I didn't do any of these drawings, I know nothing about this, but I take care of the 4 humans in our house, and one of the things that's really important to us about this and why we chose to move to this home is because we love Westmont and we love being in the community. We sit out on our front porch, yell at all the junior high kids every day after school. I substitute teach there.
In the best possible way.
Yes, lovingly, because we know them and we want them to feel free to come to our house at any time. So for us, we don't want, you know, things like obstructing families and other neighbors and people just to come over. Right before we came here, we're sitting on the little door to nowhere stoop with our dog and talking to a neighbor, and he was like, yeah, you should totally build this. So for us, it's more about community. Like, yeah, we could go tiny in the back, but our point of this is that we have that community building opportunity with neighbors that come by. So that's really important to us and kind of who we are. So that's why we'd like to do it.
Great, thank you. Good presentation. Staff?
Well, I'm not sure that you saw the dimensions from the rendering, because it looked like an elongated type patio. It actually would be a little wider than it is deep. So just in case that was a question. Also, I noticed there's a wall that hadn't been discussed. Kind of.
The patio plans aren't finalized from the contractor, but it is likely that there could be a wall around the structure.
And how tall would it be?
Probably 3 foot.
Okay. The other idea also would be to recommend permeable paving type material so that it minimizes the stormwater runoff issues that might occur based on the fact that it's a contoured site.
Yeah.
But those things can be taken at permitting and reviewed then. And there are solutions like rain barrels and swales and things that they could incorporate into their landscaping to maybe beautify and also take care of some of that excess rainwater that will be distributed through the lot.
Thank you. John, any comments on this?
No. Yes. The distance separation requirement for accessory structures like a shed from the principal structure is, has some aesthetic purpose, but it, I think also primarily has a fire concern. Can you address whether or not the fire department looked at this and what their comments were?
They
And
will
if there
be
were any
looking at
special-
it at permitting with the village. There is a permit that's outstanding. This actually came in through a permit process, and the building commissioner has already been reviewing it and has already okayed it in terms of the fire aspects and all of the rest of the structural and so on. There are requirements, for example, with the shed, that it be anchored in a manner that's, exceeds the standard because it is closer to the home to minimize any situations with hurricanes or whatever might happen. And those things are being looked at, and they've been passed through the system already with the reviews.
Before we go to the public, can you bring up the patio or terrace photo or rendering? That was the first time, I think that was the one.
That looks like it's longer than it is wide.
Yeah, this isn't drawn to scale.
Okay. You said 18 by 18?
18 by 18 and a half.
Sorry, we're not graphic designers.
Obviously, there's a slope there. And is it really 3 feet? Is that the difference over 18 feet?
Oh, I don't know what the slope condition is, but.
Or is this an illusion and that surface is below the top? In other words, could I sit on that wall?
The intention is if there is a wall, it would be a sitting wall. So it would be used as additional seating. But the options are either to dig out more at the front of near the home and then not have a wall, or to have it come out and then have it terraced down to the yard. So there's 2 different ways it could be done.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this, either for or against? Hearing no one, I will move on to our commissioners, and I'll begin with Commissioner Thomas on this.
Very good presentation, and the visual aids helped a lot. I had, for some reason, I had, you're putting a fence up, and
Yeah.
how are you going to have community if you have a fence?
Right.
And,
No, we don't want a fence.
We do not want a fence.
No fence.
Just a cute dog and lots of children.
I support it very much.
Commissioner Sharp.
Hi. I have some comments on the shed. You showed us a photo of where the shed would go, and I think that the back of your house is brick all the way up, correct?
Correct.
So I think from a fire hazard, it's not as bad as it could be if it was a wood-sided structure, for example. It's a plastic shed, so the plastic will melt. But I do agree, you'd have to get approval from the fire department on that. But the location of it makes total sense. It's better than seeing it from the street.
Yeah, and for our neighbor, like, we don't want our neighbor to have it there.
The patio, I understand that we're encroaching into the side yard, which is your front yard setback, since you're a corner lot. I don't think that it's as visually impacting. On the previous project, I was kind of concerned because there's a very strong street wall, or like a alignment where the different houses are kind of justified to the same lot line. But since your lot is actually a corner and it curves, so Williamsburg Street curves, I don't think that the street wall is a big aesthetic concern, because you're not really going to notice that encroachment, say if it was a straight street. But I do have questions on the terrace. If it is sloping as much as the rendering kind of makes it appear, you are going to have kind of a taller, like retaining wall or something at the end of it if you choose to build it up. And just to keep in mind, I don't know what the requirement is, if it's 30 inches or 36 inches, but at a certain height, you have to have a railing, which you may or may not want along that perimeter. It might be more welcoming. If a welcoming, inviting feeling is what you want, you might want to dig out and actually have more of a level entry from the sidewalk to encourage people to come up onto that space, and then have some steps up to your door. But that's a design decision that you guys could make. But just to keep in mind that railings are required at a certain height off the adjacent grade.
Okay.
I think that's all I have. I think overall I'm in support, and I think that there are unique conditions on this lot that justify the variance.
Thank you. Commissioner Bartel?
I'm glad to hear they're permeable pavers, because I was also concerned with covering so much of the yard with the patio, and where will the water go? So that's important. I'm fine with the shed. I guess I'm a little, is this connected to the door that goes nowhere?
Yes, so
There is a connection to it.
it would run right up to the stoop, so you
Okay.
basically step right out onto the patio.
Okay, all right, that was my question. But I'm very supportive also. I think it's great, and wonderful welcome to the community. It's exactly what we need and looking for in the school system, to have people right there at the schools and welcoming and watching the kids and keeping an eye on everybody, so
I'm in
kudos
all
to
their
both of you.
business, so.
That's good, that's good, yes. Takes a village, thanks.
That's right.
Commissioner Lavoy.
I really don't have a whole lot here, other than, if you go back to the picture of the shed, that red line there indicates what you're really asking for, so if you need separation there, you can actually pull it away from the building if code has an issue. If that's the exact shed that you want to build, you have room to move it with the variation requested. Everything is fine by me. I'm supportive. And welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank
We
you.
are neighbors.
Oh, yeah?
Yay. Oh, good. We're still getting to know everyone. Everyone was hibernating all winter.
It's getting nice out. Everybody's going to be around.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Good presentation, and those renderings were helpful, particularly on the patio. And there is a significant slope down to the sidewalk, and I absolutely think that what you're planning is best, because if you were to cut that down to be level with the sidewalk, you'd have, add 3 more steps down from the stoop to get, and it'd be like a hole down there. You'd be cutting into the roots of that tree that's just west of there. So I don't know what that is, 20, 30 inches, but it's a significant slope, and this is, if you can make it happen, it looks great, and I like the openness, and
I lost.
if, if there's a fence around it, I'm absolutely against it, and so very supportive and good luck with it.
Commissioner Van Buren.
Everybody stole all my thunder, but I'm fully in support of it. And great presentation.
Thank you.
All righty. Yeah, I don't have anything really to add other than, it looks like your final design on the patio is still to be determined a little bit. You might consider splitting the difference and coming down a step from the house and excavating a little bit at the other end. So that you don't have 3 feet and you don't have 3 steps. You have something in between. And that might make it the most user-friendly as well as easiest on your pocketbook when it comes time to putting that together.
That's certainly a consideration.
Always should be, always should be. Those are my only comments. I am also in support of both of these items. Any other comments from commissioners or staff? Yes,
Could you
Bruce?
just quick show the slides that had the other houses? I'm just curious. I'm going to go back and look at the records. Okay, one more.
We know that one.
This one.
And then one more. Thanks.
Great. All righty, I will close the public hearing now, and I will entertain a motion for planning and zoning item 19-013. A request from Jason and Roxanne Engstrom, the owners, regarding the property located at 933 Oakwood Drive for the following. A zoning code variance request to allow the construction of a patio in the side yard.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Sharp, second by Commissioner Thomas. This motion also includes findings of fact. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel.
Yes,
Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. I will entertain a motion for item B, a zoning code variance request to allow the construction of a shed in the rear yard with a reduced separation from the principal structure.
so moved?
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Bartel, second by Commissioner Lavoy. As with the previous one, this item will also carry with it the findings of fact. Comments or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Sharp.
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel.
Yes,
Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes.
And Chairman Chairman Pill.
Yes. Anyway, yes, you have our recommendation on both of these items, and you'll work with staff that'll coordinate with you. You'll probably need to take this a little further along by the time you get to the village board. They'll want to see some finals on these things. So you'll have some decisions to make, but they will coordinate with you when you'll appear before the village board. It's on a Thursday night sometime in the next few weeks.
Okay.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Continuing on, Planning and Zoning, item 19-014, a request from the Community Development Department for the following. A,
I didn't get that yet.
a proposed zoning ordinance text amendment to the Village of Westmont Code of Ordinance, Appendix A, zoning, Article 8, administration and enforcement regarding zoning application escrow deposits, zoning certificates, and miscellaneous corrections. Just want to tell everybody in the audience, you've waited for the highlight of the night, and here we've got it now, so be ready. Yes, sir.
You know, something just occurred to me. There was an item, did we do a mailed notice for an item that got delayed until?
The lot split,
At what address?
317 Oak.
There might be two people in the audience who were here for an item where we did notices, but then the applicants delayed their application, and I failed to tell you at the beginning of the meeting that we should probably make an announcement to that effect. Are you here for an item on, what street?
Oak Street.
A lot split on Oak Street? I apologize. The applicants they didn't withdraw their application. It's being delayed for further review, and it's not on tonight's agenda, even though we did send out mailed notices that it was planned to be discussed tonight. So my apologies. I should have remembered at the beginning of the meeting to ask the chairperson to announce that. My apologies.
And I'd always encourage you to check online. There's an agenda center on the Village of Westmont website that lists the agendas for the Planning and Zoning Commission along with other boards and commissions. And you can check next month, in advance of next month to see if that item appears on the agenda.
Was here and then left.
All right. I don't even know what happened, but you have my apologies also, so, sorry. I don't think we were aware of this item yet because it didn't even make publication for us. But I will continue on with Bruce. I think, were you going to speak about this, or Nalini?
I can speak about this one very briefly. So up until about the middle of last year, the village had in-house engineering staff who reviewed zoning cases for primarily stormwater management considerations, but also access, traffic, grading, utilities, items like that. The village does no longer have that in-house community development engineering staff, and so we've had to utilize third-party staff, consultants, to review items before they get up in front of you here at the Planning and Zoning Commission. That's only happened for the last couple of months, and the few cases that have come through, for example, the medical clinic on Ogden, we've just explained to the developer that they would be required to pay the bills that the village receives from our outside consultants. And they've agreed to pay it, and they have paid it. My concern, though, is there could be a case in the future where the village incurs costs from an outside review, and the developer decides to walk away from a project, or maybe it doesn't get approved by the village, and there are still outstanding bills, and they decide not to pay us. So to avoid that possibility, what I'm recommending and Nalini is recommending, based on our experience in other communities, is a very simple system where when a project is initially submitted to staff, and staff determines that there will be the need for outside engineering review, that we would collect money in advance that would be put into an escrow account to pay for those third-party reviewers. In order to be able to do that, we need language added to the ordinance that specifies that we're allowed to do that. And the village attorney has drafted the language that would give us that power to collect money like that. Again, specifically to pay third-party consultants. Any money that would be left after a project is decided, whether it's approved or denied, would then be refunded completely back to the applicant at the end of the process. The other piece of what we're recommending is also included in this item, and that is a recommendation that we add some language to the zoning ordinance that allows us to collect a fee for requests, typically from title companies, to do research on a property about parking and setbacks and bulk requirements and use, et cetera. It can entail quite a bit of research. The community I worked at before this one required a fee to perform that kind of research, and we're suggesting here that we would be able to charge that kind of a fee. I want to make sure, though, that people understand this would not be a fee if someone calls up and says, hey, what's the zoning on the property on the corner of First and Main or whatever, or even basic questions like, could I have a restaurant at that location? Basic questions like that we field all week, all the time, and we'll continue to do that with no fee charged. What this would cover is when title companies send us a letter or an email with a very long list of questions that get into conformities, legalities, parking requirements, uses, et cetera. And again, that does require more time from staff. So those are the two items that we're recommending and that the village attorney has drafted.
A freedom of information request would also not be included, correct?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So a Freedom of Information Act request, also known as a FOIA, is just for copies of documents. There's no analysis required. We simply go to the file and we make copies of everything that they've requested. We would not charge a fee for that. I don't think legally we're able to charge a fee for that. And we would continue to provide information in response to FOIAs without a fee. Again, though, this would be when someone calls and says, hey, we're thinking of buying this big office building. Can you verify that the amount of parking on the site meets minimum parking requirements and that the building meets all bulk requirements for setbacks and height, et cetera, where we would then do the research, look at the site, count the parking stalls, examine the uses, verify that the parking on the site meets the requirements or doesn't, and then write up an explanation in the form of a letter and then send it to the person requesting that information. Again, it's almost exclusively title companies, and it's almost exclusively part of real estate transactions where they're looking for that level of detail.
Great, thank you. John, any comments on that?
Just that I put together the language for this text amendment, but not until Monday when I emailed it to staff to review. I don't know if that ever had a chance to get distributed via email to Planning and Zoning Commission or
I did not.
Distributed tonight. But it's exactly as Bruce described it. The only other addition is that there's language throughout Article 13, which you read as Article 8, but it's actually Article 13 of the zoning ordinance that references the Economic Development Director or the Economic Development Department, which changed several years ago to Community Development Director or Department, so I made that change throughout also.
Great. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this issue? Seeing no one, we will begin with Commissioner Sharp, I believe.
Sure. I only have a question about how, if at all, does the first change, the outside engineering, impact residential kind of smaller scale projects? And what's the case now? If someone wants to build a deck and they're a little over their lot coverage or whatever, and so you guys feel like you want to have a village engineer look at it, do you do that right now as part of their variance fee? Or would that now be subject to outside fees in addition to their already, what they perceive often as high variance costs?
Right, it's a good question. There are some cases where it will be very easy to determine that no outside engineering consultant needs to look at it, and therefore we won't charge the escrow and ship it out for review. There are also cases where it will be very obvious, like a proposed medical building that redevelops an entire block on Ogden, where we're going to need an engineer to look at the preliminary plans. The question is, where is the line between those two? And we haven't quite got it figured out. We're trying to establish a relationship with the village engineer, so if we have a question, we can ask him and just say, hey, Noriel, do you think that this is something that our outside engineer should look at? That's probably the best answer I can give you right now.
Okay, that's my only concern, is that like Noriel, you could pass it to him and it'd take an hour to tell you everything's fine, but if you take it to an outside consultant, they might take 3 hours and charge you for 10. You know, like, I just see the costs going up for
Right.
individuals who don't have deep pockets, that's my only concern.
I share that concern. Up until very recently, it was an in-house staff person that provided that type of engineering review for cases that would come up to you. Because of some internal changes with staffing in the village, that's not available anymore. The village engineer is being exclusively put in charge of projects in the right-of-way. So street reconstructions, sewer main replacements, storm sewer under the streets type of projects, and not in charge of reviewing private property development. And that's simply because of a workload issue.
So there's no kind of requirement, there's no process right now where they could offer preliminary reviews to serve this board or this level of detail without going outside? Is that what I'm?
Correct, and it's not uncommon. Many villages use consulting engineers exclusively for development projects, and many, as Lillian and Bruce said, and it's been my experience with private development clients at other communities charge a fee like this. I think the key is, you know, are you dinging a homeowner an unreasonable amount for a small project? And you know, the hope and the goal is no. But you know, with lot coverage becomes an issue that sometimes can be a bit complex, and you do have to engineer around that. And if someone's looking to exceed the code requirements, there is sometimes a cost that goes along with that to make sure they're not impacting adjoining properties. And by a cost to do that, I mean it has to be properly reviewed.
Right.
And engineered.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. I completely agree with that. We just need to have wise people making a decision about, or I shouldn't say wise, trained people making a decision about what needs to go out and what is all right. That's all I got.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yeah, I would agree. Is there a creation of a fee schedule? Would there be an hourly rate depending on, so that would be created, that would be developed?
Well, a couple of thoughts. We, prior to my arrival here, my predecessor, the interim community development director, Marty Burke, created a standardized set of fees for the 3 firms that we've contracted with to provide engineering services, and that has already been standardized and adopted into our code. So that part has been done. Another thing I've been told, I think it was by Noriel or possibly by our building commissioner, is these engineers know that if they're involved in the preliminary reviews and are reasonable about it, then when it goes to the permitting phase and the more detailed plans are submitted for their review, that work usually goes to them. So there's some built-in incentive for them to be reasonable on the front end, knowing that if the project moves forward, they'll be the ones reviewing the building permit plans down the road. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does, it does. So, and I'm not objecting to the escrow issue. You want to be paid when they drop the project and you know, don't pay us back, that's an issue. So there'll be some policy regarding reimbursement of funds that aren't used?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And in fact, we've got an example from Wakanda, I think, is where you found an example, that will probably, if we won't copy it exactly, we'll borrow heavily from it, where they spell out an agreement where the village states what the money is for and, you know, what it'll be used to pay for, and then what will be returned and on what terms. Typically, you know, no interest paid, but that all money is refunded at the end of the process.
And there may be and that's in the ordinance, by the way, and also in the draft ordinance is language saying if you deplete the escrow account and additional reviews are necessary, before any more reviews are done, you have to replenish the account in amount determined by staff.
Okay, all right. Thanks, that's what I have. That's all I have.
Commissioner Lavoy?
The only thing I had was really the fee structure, you know, should be written somewhere. That way, staff doesn't get challenged by the fee, like you didn't charge that applicant the fee and you charged us this fee. And I think there should be some sort of standardized structure for single family, for commercial of what size, and, you know, fit it into a category, and this will be the fee, so everybody knows what that fee is. And then I was thinking about what we just went through with our planners, and all of a sudden, you know, that we don't have a planner. And, you know, that could happen with our engineers too, that Noriel, even though he's been here a very long time, you know, if all of a sudden he even becomes ill, you know, now all of a sudden we don't have that capability of doing it internally anymore because we don't have that qualification. So it's something that is a bit challenging to address all the issues in this kind of language, but I think you just need to have that broad stroke to say that it's possible that a fee could be charged, and this is what we're based on, and that way you're not going to be challenged about it if it becomes part of the code. So I just didn't see that in the language that you gave us, so.
The only, and I mentioned this a minute ago, and I don't know if you recall or not, but there is some standardization for the fees that these third-party consultants charge us, and that was the work done by my predecessor.
Yeah, but I think that should be built into the document.
We could reference that, maybe?
Yeah.
I agree, and we kind of talked about that earlier, that we're not going to put the fee into or the range of fees for different projects into the text of the zoning ordinance itself.
Right.
The ordinance says it's going to be fees as established by the community development director, but in that agreement, there probably would be an appendix that can be updated from time to time that would list we may have to do a range of fees based on what the consulting engineering agreements say they're going to charge the village. And I think that's good for transparency, and to your point, it's good to keep Bruce and Alini out of trouble from being accused of making arbitrary, escrow fee decisions.
And John, do you think that the fee schedule that was standardized and adopted late last year, could that be the basis for that appendix that would be referenced by this?
I think that would be the basis for it. And while I reviewed those agreements, I didn't pay great attention to the fee structure itself. So.
I know they were developed as a group effort between Marty Bork, who was the interim community development director, Noriel, the village engineer, and Jason Vitale, the building commissioner. And the firms we use provided input, and there was some back and forth between the village staff and the engineers trying to get everything standardized and rates that were agreeable to everyone. And then I believe that was put into a form that was adopted by the village as the rates for those third-party consultants.
They approved the agreements themselves, and the rates were part of the agreements.
I also think that we could be challenged from the standpoint of, if an applicant comes in and says, I'd like the village engineer to review it because I don't want to be charged a fee. And that's what I pay taxes for.
Right.
Well, that's tough. I hate to say
That's a tough argument.
but it's a tough argument for the resident or the
It is,
developer
but
to make.
I'm just
because
trying to prevent the staff from being challenged with something like that.
It's very common now for building plan reviews, permit reviews, et cetera, all to be done by outside consultants. And either it's incorporated into the permit fees themselves, which are higher than usual because it takes into account the cost of outside consultants, or there's, hey, we used an outside consultant, you now owe us for those fees.
Yeah, I just want it to be judged and considered fair and impartial to any applicant, that this is what it is for everyone, and you're not, they're not being selected out as paying a fee.
One point maybe to add to the discussion, rather than raising the application fees across the board for all zoning applications to try to cover this cost, this approach just says only those projects that require engineering will have to pay for that engineering review. So that does try to keep some fairness in terms of people not paying more if they don't need that additional review.
I agree.
And you only pay based on your level of need, based on the review needed, and if you have deposited excess, that gets refunded to you promptly, to your question.
All right, Commissioner Carmichael?
Just to be clear, that we say 3 or so different consulting and we use the very same fee schedule for all three of them.
Correct.
We don't have a different, okay. And so that was my question, if we had the same,
And
if they had different rates for.
And my understanding is prior to this, this fee schedule being standardized late last year, the different firms used different fees or charged different fees. And I believe that there were some accusations, or at least some of the more active builders and developers in this community would say, well, I want my plans to be shipped to that firm because I know their rates are lower. Or people would say, well, why'd you send my plans to that other firm? Their rates are higher. And I believe that situation in the past led to the standardization of the fees.
Right.
Do we know what the adjacent, what adjacent villages are doing? Like, how is this compared to our neighbors?
My only personal experience is in Woodridge, where I had a development, and they have a one line in their zoning ordinance that says they can collect an escrow fee. There's no agreement requirement, there's no fee schedule, there's nothing, but my client came in, wanted to develop, and they said, okay, you owe a $4,000 deposit. So that there wasn't the transparency, I think, that staff here is ultimately going to provide.
I just
I
like, I
will
like
say-
to know, because I get, as, you know, I'm sure a lot of us do, I get complaints all the time about Westmont. It's Westmont people saying, Westmont, the permitting process, my contractor doesn't want to do any work in Westmont. And I think that that message is probably similar no matter where you are. I think if they were in Clarendon Hills, they'd probably say, oh, Clarendon Hills. Like, I think there's a little bit of just gab involved there, but it is helpful for, I think, commissioners to know, hey, actually, you know what? Westmont's kind of in line with these other communities. You know, and if you really take issue with it, call other communities and, you know, see that I'm saying the truth here. That's all, just transparency and be able to talk to people who talk to me all the time about it. That's all.
One other comment that I have, and that is, because I do this for a living, is that the amount of time and effort put into review is contingent upon the quality of the drawings received. And all of us has seen really nice-looking drawings here, and then we've seen drawings that are really lacking a lot of information. And sometimes it has to go back and forth several times before the applicant can get it right. We've seen architects do that, as an applicant come in, and just the information isn't there. That takes a lot more time to go through the very basics when you deliver the package to a consultant and has to go back to them multiple times. So you can't standardize that fee because you don't know how good the plans are coming in. So that's my only other comment.
Commissioner Van Buren?
No comment.
And I too, I would like, as we approach the implementation of this, it would be nice to have a small chart just of surrounding communities. We've seen that before, taking into account anywhere from 3 to 6 around us, just to provide a frame of reference, because I also get asked a lot of questions. And it's nice to be able to have that background with it. But otherwise, I understand exactly why you're doing this, and I understand the reasons for it, and it's the solution, and it's in use in several other communities. So I have no other questions on that. John, is there would be a motion on this, just like any other item?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you did go to the public already, right?
Yep. Any other comments from commissioners or from staff or from John, legal? No. Okay. So we'll close the public hearing. And I will entertain a motion for planning and zoning item 19-014, a request from Community Development Department for the following. A proposed zoning ordinance text amendment to the Village of Westmont Code of Ordinance, Appendix A, zoning, Article 13, administration enforcement regarding zoning application, escrow deposits, zoning certificates, and miscellaneous corrections.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Carmichael, second by Commissioner Van Buren. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. All right. last but not least, we move on to miscellaneous items. Yeah.
Two items to talk about briefly. One is the possibility of merging the dates for the June meeting and the July meeting into one meeting on June 26th. We've looked at the cases that are in their preliminary stages of submittal and just the beginning stages where we'd start to get a sense of whether or not they'll be ripe and ready for public hearings or not. And we think that there are two cases that will not be ready for an early June meeting, but might be ready for a meeting either in July on its normally scheduled date or possibly on a June 26th date if the applicants provide all the materials in a timely fashion. So the question is, do people want to try to combine those two meetings, and does that work for people's schedule? In terms of cases and applicants, we believe we can make it work if you guys would like to do that.
We'll just have this open discussion. I'm fine with that. Any other comments?
I'm fine.
No objection. Whatever works for everybody else.
So it would be June 26th, the last Wednesday in June rather than the second Wednesday in June. And then the meeting following that, unless we needed to call a special meeting, but the plan would to then be not to have a meeting until August, the second Wednesday in August. I forget what the date of that is.
14th, I think, 14th.
Or is it the 14th? Actually, I can check right here. You're right, August 14th.
I think that's good. I think we had affirmatives around the board here.
Okay. The second item was just an update for you. This came up in a discussion. I think we had, I forget with which commissioner, someone stopped in the office. But we were talking about front porches and the zoning case tonight where the proposed roof extension would encroach into the front yard. And I'm familiar from a job I had many years ago in Minnesota where they wrote a text amendment that encouraged front porch additions even if it encroached into the required front yard. And it was part of making inviting spaces, beautifying the fronts of houses, and creating porches, basically, where they wouldn't otherwise have been allowed because of the setback requirements. The rules were very specific, though, in terms of the appearance of a front porch, the openness of a front porch. They could not be enclosed. If I remember correctly, the owner had to sign something stating that they would not enclose it in the future. And then there were some appearance requirements in terms of matching that front porch addition to the existing structure. If there's interest and support for staff drafting something basically modeled off of that Minnesota community, we could do that and then present that to you for discussion at a meeting, possibly even at the June meeting, where we hope to talk about some other text amendments. So I just wanted to get a sense here of if people would like us to at least put some time and effort into that and draft something for your consideration at a later date.
I personally like the idea.
I agree.
I like the idea too, but I also, maybe we should consider the opportunity to do that, but we have variations that are very repetitive at times, and maybe after we go through and we do set precedents on certain issues,
Yes.
that we could build that in as an amendment, so we don't have our applicants go through expense of coming before us just as a administrative task.
Right.
So if we can take some of the things that we do and highlight them to say that we should consider a text amendment continuously, so it prevents our residents and people coming before us from incurring that expense.
If I could respond, I think that's a great idea, and this is probably something everyone around the table understands, but if a community sees requests for the same kinds of variations over and over again, that's usually a sign that the ordinance needs to be examined and possibly tweaked. So I agree.
Good point. Great, so I think we have an affirmative on that.
Great, that helps.
All right, I just had two quick announcements. Just want to remind our community that on Memorial Weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 24th through the 26th, the Red, White, and Barbecue will take place up at Ty Warner Park. And the Westmont Park District will have their 10th annual this year, Race to the Flag 5K Walk and Run on Sunday, the 26th. That gets off out of Ty Warner Park and goes through the Oakwood community. And the money raised for that is in support of the People's Resource Center. So a worthwhile cause. Anyone else have comments or questions?
Yes, I have one, and that is that we have Sunday, May 12th is Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to
Mother's
all of our
Day.
mothers in the community.
Hello, Mom, I know you're watching. Great, all right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Thomas, second by Commissioner Sharp. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.